At 6 in the morning, coffee steaming in my hand and fog lifting off Lake Marigold, I heard the diesel first, the kind of throat-deep growl that makes the ground learn a new, unpleasant language, and through that soft, pearly mist I watched a yellow blade tilt toward the old stone arch my great-grandfather set in place in 1923, the arch every kid in this valley ran across, the arch that stitched our side of the lake to the world, the arch some HOA queen decided was an eyesore, and in that moment something in me stood up straight and refused to sit down again. I'm Cole Harrington, civil engineer, two hands that like plans and rivets and water, and 3 months ago I inherited a slice of shore and the Harrington Arch my great-grandfather Arthur Harrington built with limestone. He cut himself, right after the Great War taught him how to do hard things, and I thought I'd spend mornings fishing and evenings sanding handrails with my wife Emily, not whatever this is. The bulldozer belonged to the new money across the cove, the luxury compound with gates that whisper and cameras that blink, a development called Cedar Crest Reserve, governed by the Cedar Crest Lakeside Council, which is HOA speak for people who think taste can be legislated. Its president, Dana Whitmore, arrived 2 years ago in a spotless white SUV that has never met a pothole. And within 6 months, she'd slipped into power like a ring on a finger. The certified letter she sent me had weight to it, like some letters do. Threats are heavier on good paper, and inside. Under that gracious tone that feels like being patted on the head with a stiletto, she cited Covenant 47B and gave me 30 days to erase my great-grandfather's work or pay $500 a day until I cried uncle. I actually laughed, until I didn't. Engineers don't throw tantrums. We read the manual. So I climbed into Arthur's attic and opened boxes that smelled like dust and winters. And I found surveys and deeds and what mattered most, a grandfathering clause that wrapped the bridge in legal wool. I brought it to a meeting at the community hall, a place that always smells like waxed floors, coffee that died bravely, and the faint perfume of disappointment, and laid those papers down like a winning hand. Dana barely blinked. Times change, Mr. Harrington. Progress requires sacrifice, she said, with the voice people use when they're explaining how gravity works to a 6th grader. The vote went 5-2, enforcement marching forward like a parade. On the gravel, outside, with the stones clicking under my boots, I understood this wasn't about safety or aesthetics. It was about a picture in her head where men like me didn't fit. By week's end, the Compliance Patrol appeared at dawn. 2 men in matching polos from Whitmore Protective Services. Turns out Dana's husband Grant Whitmore invoices the HOA monthly, reading violations off a clipboard like they were reciting grocery items. Grass at 3.25 inches. Dock paint not within pallet. Shed needs pressure wash. Mailbox shade incorrect. A fishing net visible from the road. The theater was petty and relentless. $1,200 in fines in 2 weeks. And when I checked the state site out of habit, I discovered Whitmore Protective Services had let its security license lapse, operating without authorization for 6 months. Engineers catalog things. That's one. Then Emily and I walked the Whitmore property with a friend who inspects for a living and found a deck extension with no permits, a pool house 6 inches over the setback, and a designer garden trespassing 3 feet onto my line. That's 2. Then I filed complaints with the licensing board and the county survey office, quietly, like tightening bolts. The whispers started. He's difficult. That bridge is ugly. He doesn't understand progress. Emily came home from the grocery in Red Willow County and said the cashier wouldn't meet her eyes, and that stung worse than any letterhead. Anonymous tips suddenly bloomed. My bridge structurally unsafe. Me dumping chemicals. Which is funny if you know I'm the guy who teaches high schoolers how to test pH with clean hands. Meanwhile, I filed open records requests and dove into archives until my eyes buzzed. And there, laid across the faded maps like a seam only family recognizes, I found what Dana had never bothered to learn. Old water rights that ran older than zoning, older than covenants, older than her pearls. Secondary rights tied to Arthur's name, rights that included something named, without drama, Flow Management Authority. In plain English, my family didn't just build a bridge. We had the legal right to decide how much water stayed in Lake Marigold. I took a long walk with that knowledge. The new resort, Lakeside Meridian, a $4 million temple to curated weekends, had docks cut to a very specific height, lakefront dining at a very specific level, and a bank loan with very specific water clauses in the fine print. Water, though, doesn't read bylaws. It reads grade, friction, old agreements, the quiet logic of gravity. Dana thought she was playing HOA chess. She didn't know I speak the language of rivers. 3 county trucks arrived the next Tuesday, an inspector with a clipboard that ruins mornings. Anonymous tip, safety evaluation. He went at the stone with calipers and meters for 4 hours, then admitted the arch was steady as a prayer, before handing me a citation demanding $3,000 in seismic reinforcement in New Mesa, Texas, land of big sky and small earthquakes, and, what are the odds? A business card. Whitmore Construction could handle the work for 12 grand. I called the state board. Grant's contractor license was dust. I called a friend at building permits. The seismic rule applied to new structures, not existing ones. Knowledge stacks like lumber. You stand on it. That night, I pressed my thumb against the spine of a century-old field book and found the seam I needed. The old dam's blueprints showed bypass channels, a secondary spillway system aligned with my bridge, a design meant to be worked by one person with a wrench and respect. I slept for the first time in weeks. Dana accelerated. Cameras sprouted across the cove like mushrooms after rain, all pointing at my place. A restraining order request landed on a judge's desk claiming I'd threatened the dam. The judge tossed it. The evidence was me asking questions and pulling public files, but stigma has a long half-life, and half the neighborhood decided I was a danger because fear needs a mascot. Then I read Lakeside. Meridian's environmental and financing filings. Public, because incentives mean sunshine. And there it was, drop below 18 inches from full for 72 hours, and the $4 million note becomes immediately due. 18.5 inches in 6 hours. That's what the old bypass could do if you nursed it. I didn't reach for the lever. Not yet. I called Ava Delgado, a water rights attorney in Austin who has made ranchers smile and developers swear, and when I laid the paper on her conference table she said, "Cole, if this holds, you're not just strong, you're holding a royal flush at a checkers party." She took the case on contingency, lawyer for love and profit, and drove up to Red Willow County to lay out a negotiation. Keep the bridge as a historic structure. Guarantee minimum water levels for the resort. Establish clear architectural oversight for new builds. Everyone gets to save face. At the same time, we prepped our maintenance plan because secondary channels require routine exercise, and engineering lives in the overlap between lawful and practical. I also visited George Pike, the old dam operator who could disassemble a turbine by touch. Over coffee at the diner, George said, "Your great-granddad built redundancy like breath. Those bypasses haven't been used since the drought of '86, but they'll turn." He took me out and showed me the concrete housing nobody noticed because it looks like a stump with ideas. Clockwise opens, counter closes, he said, and I turned that will by inches until my arms understood its language. Meanwhile, Mrs. Priya Patel, our oldest neighbor on the HOA board, introduced me to Tom Alvarez, a maintenance tech at the resort who grew up fishing under the arch and now has to wear a golf shirt to work. She treats staff like co-tracks, he told me, then lowered his voice. But we can't lose these jobs. The Cedar Crest Lakeside Council staged a crisis intervention meeting the week before Thanksgiving. Dana imported a friend from the city to play engineer on a projector. Never touched the stone, threw around words like catastrophic and imminent, and the board voted 7-1 to demolish at dawn and charge me $15,000 for the privilege. The lone dissent was Mrs. Patel, born in 1939 and nobody's fool. I filed for an emergency injunction that night. Because engineers are not afraid of forms, and at 9 the next morning Judge Marisol Kent read for 12 minutes and said what needed saying. 30-day restraining order, immediate harm avoided. Handle this in channels meant for grown-ups. I called Dana from the courthouse steps. Demolitions canceled. Her silence lasted a long time. Then this is war. War in her mouth meant more letters, more patrols, more whispers. War, in mine, meant facts. I reviewed HOA ledgers, open to members by law, and found 30 grand in consultations approved by Dana to companies. owned by her husband and brother-in-law. Emily's sister Monica Green, a paralegal, built a cross-reference file that could make a prosecutor hum. Next, buried in a 1923 box, I found the contract, naming Arthur Harrington chief hydraulic engineer on the entire lake system, and, stapled like an afterthought, the water agreement granting him and his heirs perpetual secondary rights, including flow management authority, capitalized like a cathedral. I called my old professor at A&M. He whistled low and said, "That's federal water law, son." Dana hired Graham and Sutter LLP, a $2,000 an hour Dallas firm that likes to wear out boots on small towns, and they flooded the docket with challenges and environmental hysteria. They also convinced a federal judge to sign a restraining order painting me as an imminent threat to interstate commerce. 2 hours after the deputies fingerprinted me for a charge that read like a thriller, Ava had me bonded out and smiling because she recognized a gift, not a shackle. The federal order acknowledged my rights existed, it simply paused them. She filed her own action under old federal statutes, obtained a counter-injunction that superseded the local one, and explained to Sheriff Nolan Reyes that federal water rights enforcement beats local panic every day of the week. On cue, Dana ringed the dam with private guards, men in tactical pants auditioning for a movie, and went on TV to call me an extremist. Olivia Tran from Channel 8 ran both sides. The internet did the arithmetic it loves. Property rights groups called. Environmental lawyers called. Old-timers who still remembered Arthur sent cobbler and clippings. When Dana called a final community protection vote to authorize any and all measures. After he reported it, recorded Dana offering $15,000 if he'd make it look like Cole sabotaged the controls. That crossed the last line there is to cross. Dawn, clear and cold. The kind of morning that turns edges into truth. I walked to the concrete housing with Ava, George, Sheriff Reyes, 3 deputies, 2 investors in camel hair coats, a small half-moon of cameras, and Dana in a white suit that said Queen and eyes that said Cliff. She planted herself between me and the bolts and announced, for the record and the news, that I would not pass. Ava handed the sheriff a packet. Superseding federal order. Mr. Harrington has authority. He read, nodded, and asked Dana to step aside. She didn't at first, then she did, because the law had taken its seat. Mr. Harrington, Olivia Tran asked, microphone steady, "What are you doing here today?" I kept turning the ratchet on a bolt that hadn't moved in a generation and answered without looking up. Routine maintenance on secondary water management, designed by Arthur Harrington in 1923, lawful under federal rights and normal operations. The panel came free. Inside sat the brass wheel George. Had oiled a week ago, a golden, honest thing, and when I put my hand on it, I felt my great-grandfather's hand layered under mine, all the way through the years. Dana shouted for the sheriff to arrest me. He declined politely. I turned the wheel 3 slow times clockwise. Somewhere deep in the dam, a century-old machine cleared its throat, and water began to speak in a voice made of stone. Television. Dana stared at the receding line like someone watching a lie lose color. "You can't," she whispered. I stood, brushed concrete dust from my palms, and finally looked at her. I offered compromise, then partnership, then patience. I said to the cameras, because some truths need air, and you chose war. This is what losing a water rights war looks like. Mrs. Patel's voice arrived from the crowd like the first bird after a storm. "Welcome home, Cole. Arthur would be proud. I didn't drain it to the bones. Water is patient and fair, and so are the people who love it." 6 hours, 18.5 inches, enough to spring the loan clause and cancel a calendar full of weddings and retreats Dana had sold with glossy brochures, and then I closed the wheel, restored normal flow, and walked away, because sometimes you show that you can, then you choose not to. That night, as the bank called their note and investors blinked hard at spreadsheets, a man named Henry Zhao, lead partner on the resort's financing, phoned me with a voice that had learned respect quickly. "Mr. Harrington, we can keep fighting, or we can build a future. Proposal. You maintain the arch as a protected landmark. We guarantee levels under your oversight. We put the community first." I slept like a man who just set down a heavy box. The aftermath didn't roar. It settled, like silt, like sense. Graham and Sutter withdrew. Dana resigned her presidency. Then her address. Grant lost his licenses. The county and a U.S. attorney looked at the recordings of attempted bribery and misuse of community funds and did the arithmetic the law requires. Under a new board, Mrs. Patel as president and Tom Alvarez as VP, the HOA voted to establish the Harrington Arch. Historic corridor, with plaques that tell children how limestone behaves under load and how neighbors behave under pressure. Lakeside Meridian reopened 3 months later under new management, donating 5% of profit to the school and the volunteer firehouse, hiring back every worker Dana shed during her reign of tight smiles. We signed a water management agreement that reads like common sense. I'm retained as operations consultant. George Pike teaches me the parts even his bones remember. Sheriff Reyes keeps the peace. Henry Zhao keeps his word. The minimum lake level is now a promise, not a hope. Emily and I used speaking stipends and settlement checks to seed the Arthur Harrington Water Rights Scholarship at A&M, and the first recipient, Maria Alvarez, Tom's daughter, sent us a photo from a field lab, sleeves rolled, smile full, the kind of picture that makes you believe this can all get easier for someone, if not for you. The state legislature passed the Harrington Act, a tidy law that tells every HOA from Red Willow County to New Mesa that pre-existing water rights and historic structures aren't suggestions. Our arch went on the national register, my inbox filled with lake committees asking for help. Turns out there are a lot of Danae in the world and a lot of old papers that still hold. It wasn't clean the whole way. Counter-injunctions superseded the nonsense. Meanwhile, Dana's private guards postured at the dam until Sheriff Reyes explained jurisdiction in a voice like granite, and the media circus ate its own tail. You can only shout wolf so many times before people look around and notice it's a dog and it's wagging. We also learned the quiet lesson communities have to learn after a fight. You clean up together, even if you argued on opposite sides, because the mud doesn't check your ballot. I built benches in the shade of cottonwoods with lumber I planed myself. Teenagers in Red Willow High Science Club tested turbidity off the arch and wrote numbers in pencil like they mattered, because they do. Emily organized Bridge Day, bluegrass, barbecue, a table of photographs where you can see Arthur grinning next to that gorgeous arch when it was still a raw, young thing. On the first Bridge Day, Mrs. Patel slipped a small brass plaque into my hand. It reads, built by Arthur, defended by Cole, held by all of us. And I will not lie, I had to walk to the far side of the arch to finish crying. As for Dana, she moved to Arizona. The papers say the charges did what charges do when a DA and a U.S. attorney hear a recording that starts, 15,000 if you make it look like. I didn't celebrate that part. I don't toast wreckage, even earned wreckage. Before often outranks the thing that arrived last week in a certified envelope. Second, water remembers. It remembers channels and choices and names on agreements, and it rewards the people who respect both physics and precedent. Third, neighbors are stronger than presidents, of boards, of companies, of anything. If they show up with binders and backbone instead of torches and Facebook posts. Closure? You want it, and you deserve it. Here, the bridge stands, designated historic, its stones warm by noon. The resort thrives. Honest money buying honest Saturdays, the HOA balances. Aesthetics with history now that Mrs. Patel holds the gavel like a ladle, not a scepter. Emily and I are expecting in the spring, and I imagine small feet running across the Harrington Arch and hear a laugh I never got to record, Arthur's, in the clink of cup to limestone. And yet, because a good ending leaves room for the world to keep breathing, I'll ask you what I ask myself when the dock is quiet and the air tastes like pine. Was turning that valve on live television a righteous act of community self-defense or a flourish I could have spared? Where do we draw the line between legitimate standards and creeping control? When does protecting property values turn into a costume for bullying? And how should a town decide who belongs when history and money argue across the